Wow, 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 wow. Thank you so much.
Good morning.
Good morning. Is it still morning? You know, in some events like this, they save the best for last. But in this one, I think it was whoever had the last plane flight, because I don't know why it's us. But we're very, very happy to be here. Are you happy to be here?
I am thrilled. This is, full disclosure, the first time that Howard and I have had the opportunity to tell this story together on one stage. And so I'm probably going to cry, just saying.
Yeah. And we probably will. How do we make this thing work? Awesome. So a little context in case you don't know, and I apologize, this isn't intended as a pitch, but this is context for the type of organization we are, which I think helps set context for the path and the journey that we've been on, because our journey is a little bit different than I think most are. So we're a very mission and vision-driven organization. Tagline is transforming the world of work, but really it's about helping. We really believe in a future world where the worlds of work are joyful, are prosperous, and sustainable. And I bet when you look around at most organizations, they're not at that spot right now, so we still have a lot to do. We believe by companies and individuals adopting Agile principles and values that they can achieve those things. And we're responsible from our board of directors to ensure that every dollar that comes into our organization gets spent towards that mission. We're organized in a little different way, too. I was hired in September of 2018. I applied for a very traditional CEO role. And the moment that the board of directors hired me, we immediately discussed what would a product owner role be for our organization. Let's think differently. But knowing the fact that a product owner is worthless without a Scrum Master, the board quickly found Melissa to join my team and join together. So we both share the traditional role of what would be a CEO role. And so she joined in January of 2019. So we've been together right at a year now.
Just over that.
It has still been one heck of a journey. We're really different. I don't know whether you'll pick that up here. Besides, by the way, being with her is the one time in my life I feel like I'm the tall one. Like, most of you are far taller than me, but
Small packages.
Yes.
Big voices.
Big voices here. She tends to journal and process internally and is a really, really deep thinker. I tend to jump into the middle of it and get out loud. We're really, really different on our profiles, but we're really the same on the principles and values. As a co-lead team, we have never disagreed on what's the heart of the thing we're supposed to be doing. She may want to move slightly different and at a different pace, but we are so aligned on that mission.
So it's funny that Stu referred to the name of our talk, because what I wanted to call this was, what is the crazy shit that happens when two Agilists get to actually run the company? But it was a little bit too long. But one of the things that I always think about when we talk about where we jumped into the journey was that that's not where the Scrum Alliance story started. And so I always want to be really careful that we honor where we came from and even the people that were there just shortly there before us, because without them and without some of the things that they had tried, then this last year wouldn't have been possible.
Right.
And so just to give you a little bit of context, prior to Howard and I joining, I would not say that Scrum Alliance was the most agile company. Much
Not a
like, yeah, no laughing, but much like probably many of your organizations, there were pockets of agility. There were teams or departments that were doing well. We're not a very big company, and Howard's going to explain the actual structure as it was in a moment, but in that 50-person company, there were little experiments that were going on when we got there. And so I can't iterate enough, I have to honor that, because without that, we wouldn't have had the courage to do what we did. But we knew that these little things were working. So for one example, it was very departmental, but they had experimented with pulling together these cross-functional teams. And the intent was that these teams would come together 50% of their time. So literally, this initiative team, as it was called, would come together in the morning and work on these kind of company-wide projects. And then in the afternoon, they'd go back to their department. And I know, pausing. There we go. And so in the afternoons, they'd go back to their departments, and it was actually largely successful. So we're talking about marketing, IT, education, support, all of these people coming together in the morning. But over time, the cultural gravity of the organization, suddenly people needed to go back to their departments at 11 a.m. and then 10:30. And so over time, they were gradually being sucked back into their departments. But we saw that it could work. And so suddenly we were at this place when we arrived where we have a choice. We can either keep doing what they've been doing. I really don't want to hold this. It's off. Is it off? It's off. Yeah. All right. We can either keep doing what they've been doing. Which one is it?
Well, this isn't awkward. Can I be next? Wait, sorry.
We'd either keep doing what they've been doing to that point, which was the best that they could do with the information and the circumstances that they had at the time, or we could choose a different path.
So in September 2018, when I arrived, we had moved to a very traditional-looking company, kind of a pyramid, as you would see on the one side of the screen. So we had marketing heads and marketing departments, and we had education heads and education department, and they were all very well-meaning for what that they were, but they were also trying to be agile teams. Like you've seen this blend of very traditional hierarchical structures and managerial structures also, but they have to be on Scrum teams. Like the tension in that is madness. It's like we had people that were stuck in this two-world thing, that they had managers that actually were on their Scrum team, and they also had another team that they were on where they were the product owner, but their manager was Scrum. It was the weirdest kind of matrixed weird, but they were trying their best to do different things. And of course, the speed in which to get anything through the system wasn't good at that point in time.
And I don't know if you noticed at the beginning, but we're the Scrum Alliance.
Yeah,
and so
kind of important.
I'd like to use Scrum as much as is appropriate. So given the experiments that had been run and what we envisioned for our team, which was joyful, prosperous, and sustainable, of which that structure was none, we actually decided to make a massive change. And I want to I just want to say this at this point, that in my abstract I wrote that this was our journey, and we're not saying that this is everyone's journey.
Amen.
So we had, first of all, the two Agilists, leadership buy-in, you had it here.
Yeah.
But also, just the ability to experiment. We had a supportive community, a supportive board. So what we did was we changed everything. So over the course of about 3 days, we went from a hierarchical, very traditional departmental company to 6 interdisciplinary, community-centric Scrum teams.
She's the only one who can say that all in one breath, by the way. I get my tongue tangled.
We did this through a 3-day self-selection workshop in which we mapped out all the work, and we actually let people choose what team they would like to be on based on the community that they were going to serve and the work that that team was going to hold. Those community-centric teams, I can't always tell it this way but you guys are Agilists, so you get it, are really based on people's position in the Agile journey. So we have one team called the foundational team that works with newbies, 1 to 2 years. We have our practitioner team who works with people who have been around, say, 3 to 5 years, because those set of Agilists have a different set of needs. We have the guides team, which is trainers and coaches, the leaders team, which supports C-levels and HR marketing, and our gatherings team, which supports gatherings all over the world. And what was really important about this for me
was that these are not product teams. I want to say that one more time. These are not product teams. We are a membership organization that supports a community. So these are community teams, and their job is to fulfill needs for our community. And sometimes, maybe our certifications are the thing that fulfill a specific need, but that is not the only thing that we serve to our communities. And this was a huge shift. I mean, again, not product teams. So this was a huge shift. Another important piece here, and I love that, I can't remember who it was now. One of the earlier speakers had the different teams and the manager in the middle and then the manager kind of on the outside. We don't have any managers at all. We have product owners and we have Scrum Masters, and they are full-time and they have one team. And that is their job. And they're amazing, by the way. So we went from very hierarchical, very traditional, almost overnight, at least in 3 days, as we went through this self-selection workshop. The other piece to mention just really quickly is we do have a concept of communities of practice. So we have co-ops, because each one of those teams is education, IT, marketing, support. I always miss one. Oh, and community and events. And so each of those teams have those people, but they still need other people who do what they do. So once a week, they get together with the other marketing people on the other teams, and that keeps us cohesive and aligned, and also just gives them learning opportunities with each other.
By the way, that 3 days, it's not instantly perfect. I don't want you to assume that. I just had a meeting with the product owners the other day where they're like, I'm stressed because my team is a developer, a marketing person, an education person, and I'm struggling with writing really quality user stories for our customer persona, and what are we doing? And even the coaches that are helping serve us and help, they're like, we've never really coached somebody exactly like you guys. So like the POs on these teams are kind of the world's foremost authority in what does a cross-departmental team look like. So, but for us as leaders, the path is different too, right? We couldn't be a traditional leader in an organization like this. It reminds me of the way that the paths were drawn in old maps. If you're crazy about maps like I was, if you look at like maps from the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th century of early Europe, they're all the same, by the way, because they're all wrong. But they're all written from the voice of the leader. If it's the king, it shows the political power and how the world is done. If it's the Pope, for instance, it says how God did things and how all these things happen. But the one thing every map from the 1st century all the way through to like the 11th or 12th century have all in common, they all have fixed edges. Because the leader was source of all knowledge. Traditional company environments has the leader, the CEO, making most all the decisions. And being the single point of all decisions puts him as the single point of failure in a way. But what happened in about the 13th, 14th century was super interesting. The first maps that were made that showed this big area out towards the west that was dark, and it didn't have an edge, and it had a freaking sea monster. And for the first time in the history, did a leader say, these are the things I know, but out there I have no freaking clue. Matter of fact, I don't even know I'm putting a sea monster because I'm scared of it, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to fund you. I'm going to let you put cross-functional teams together in boats. I'm going to give you money and equip you on your adventure sailing towards that sea monster and go seek what's out there. And it started this moment of adventure. And actually the beginning of scientific thinking was at that moment because a leader first acknowledged what they knew, but mostly what they didn't know. So they created these cross-functional teams, let them self-organize, gave them an edict, pointed them in a direction, gave them guardrails, don't take more than this much of my money, but whatever you come back with, share with us. The role of a leader in today's organizations has to do that. You can't be the one that sits at the top of an organization with all the decisions. Melissa and I, in our organizational chart, sit at the bottom. We're here in service to our teams that are the ones in those ships sailing towards that sea monster. They're empowered to make those decisions. They have the budget to make those decisions and to sail and seek what does that customer or that community member need. And that's our job as a leader, to turn this thing upside down and be the empowerer and the enabler in the adventure for those teams. They're the closest to the customer, and they're the closest to get to make those decisions.
And the only way that you keep 6, and actually now 7, because we've had another one kind of emerge since the origin, the only way that you keep those 7 teams together, though, in one culture is through the telling of stories. So we are the stories that we tell. We also had a bunch of stories from the past that were still being told to us, about us, between us, and we needed new stories. And they were happening all the time. It's not like we had to make up new stories, but how do we create channels for people to tell those stories, and how do we actually teach them to identify the stories to tell? And so we did that through a couple of channels, literal channels in some cases. I'm sure many of you are on Slack. We have an actual storytelling channel in our Slack workspace. And I spent about 4 months saying, oh my gosh, that's an amazing story. If you're comfortable, would you mind sharing that on Slack? So that everyone else in the organization can hear that your team swarmed yesterday and, knocked out some amazing thing together. Or, oh my gosh, that's an amazing story. If you're comfortable, like literally I said this over and over and over, if you're comfortable, please share that story on Slack. That as a product owner, you were able to just share with your team the problem that you were looking to solve, and they jumped on it and came up with something you never would have imagined yourself. So that was one way, was our storytelling channel, and I still am a broken record to this day. We also have a gratitude channel. And the gratitude channel is a literal gratitude prompt that we do. It started out every day, and now it's about once a week. I'll put a gratitude prompt. And excuse me. The important thing about the gratitude prompt was, again, shifting the narrative. This team had gone through an incredible amount of change. Things were very uncertain, and it was really important for us all to remember what was good in the world for a little while there. And now it just blows up all the time. Our hiring events are another way that we tell our stories. The funny thing about telling stories is when you tell your story to other people, even if you're unsure about it, then you start to actually emotionally attach to it. And so we have a crazy way of hiring people that we don't have time for. It's a whole talk in itself. But we use that opportunity to tell our story so that the people that we hire come in as part of that story. I don't have time for all this. A book club. We actually did a Friday book club, and the very first book that we did was Dare to Lead by Brené Brown. So suddenly people are telling each other their stories of courage and vulnerability, if you're familiar with Brené. So that was really, really impactful. And so I can say, the structure itself was obviously a huge change, but that wasn't enough. We had to continually, and we still continually are supporting that through other ways of kind of shifting our culture and supporting it and letting people know that they're safe. But it's not enough for just us to say that. They need to hear that from each other.
Yeah, we were acknowledging the fact that the same story will always be told until you give your team a new story to tell. And so Melissa's done a really good job of helping our team understand new stories to tell. So far, we've actually seen a lot of good happen for this. I mean, we've gone through a lot of turmoil in the last year, a lot of tears from both of us and from our teams as they're learning to work in a different way. The joy that some of our teammates that have been there 4 or 5 years that are like, this has been on the backlog now for 4 years. And we pulled it in and it got done this week. For the first time, we were actually to own our things. individuals that used to be in a department that were only allowed to process an application on something and now are free to build booth space and write articles and do podcasts and do other things that they've never gotten to do before. The joy from the individuals. Also the joys for me from our stakeholders. You know, we've got some of them in the room, but for the first time, I think, in our organization's history, our community is actually telling the story of what we're doing internally as a pretty interesting model of how you might implement Scrum in an organization, which is a pretty good, powerful indication to me that maybe we're on the right track for something.
So my question to you is, what path will you choose? Do you have a way that you can impact joy, prosperity, and sustainability in your organization? It may not be as big as ours, but I'm sure that there's something there for you too.
Okay. Thank you guys so much.